Greetings loyal subscribers and honoured guests. Welcome to part 3 of my series looking at the Atari Collection 1 for the Evercade, Blaze's new handheld for fans of retro and retro style games. Today we're examining games 11 through 15. Let's begin. We're starting with Gravatar, which is another Atari 2600 version of an arcade game. As you would expect, there are the usual compromises to the visuals and gameplay that comes with moving a game over to the less powerful hardware, but this is still quite recognisable. You start off on a map of the solar system and can pilot your little ship to one of several different planets. Once you arrive, there will be an enemy base with gun emplacements and blue squares that you have to collect. Once you've destroyed or picked up everything that's there, you can leave and the planet is considered completed. It then promptly blows up. All of that is easier said than done though, because as indicated by the title, gravity does play an important part in Gravatar. Your craft is affected by it, and you have to make careful use of your thrusters to navigate your way around the levels. There's also a sun on the planetary map which does have a gravitational pull of its own, so be careful not to get sucked in. Finally, there are rogue UFOs that roam the map and will trigger a one-on-one battle if you make contact with them. This game was a major influence on the budget game called Thrust for home computers such as the BBC Micro and Commodore 64, so if you played that game and find this one eerily familiar, then that is the reason. The gravity does make the game a bit tricky, but this 2600 version is slightly easier than its arcade parent. On the whole, I think I'm going to give it a score of 3 out of 5. It's a decent enough game, but not really my cup of tea. Following that is the 2600 version of another of Atari's most famous properties, Missile Command. I used to play a bootleg version of this on my BBC Micro computer quite a bit back in the 80s, but this is the first time I've played this version. It does make some compromises to the gameplay. In the arcade, the number of bases that you have left affects how many shots you can fire back at the incoming missiles, but in this home version you just have the one pool of ammunition. As with most other 2600 adaptations, it is also slower and less challenging, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. The game plays quite nicely and you can aim the crosshair with the Evercade's D-pad quite well. Again, having the arcade or the 7800 version instead would have been nice, but this is far from awful. I'll give it a solid 3.5 out of 5. Then we come to a motorcycle racing game for the 7800, and I'm afraid it's average at best. The name, Motorcycle, puts you in mind of something like Road Rash with weaponry, doesn't it? Well, instead we just have a fairly standard and somewhat bland racing game. It can be tricky to get round the corners in one piece to start with because there is no specific button used for deceleration. You just have to let go of the accelerator and let the bike slow down naturally. You are up against a time limit and you can't really afford to come off your bike too many times or you will have no chance of finishing all the laps. The handling of the bikes doesn't feel especially great either. After spending a while trying to like this one, I don't really think I'll be coming back to it. Some may squeeze some enjoyment out of it, but I found it boring and frustrating in equal measure, so it's a 2 out of 5 for me. Next we have another racing game. This time it's Night Driver for the Atari 2600, and it's actually one of the earliest examples of a behind-the-car racing game in existence. The effect of the cat's eyes was quite clever and innovative back in 1978, but time hasn't been terribly kind to this game. Racing games in particular have evolved so much over the years thanks to the 3D revolution that it can be hard to go back to games from beforehand. Night Driver is incredibly basic and lacks any real objective as well. You just keep going without crashing for as long as you can. This gets a bit dull after a while. I'm not debating its importance to video game history, but its entertainment value in 2020 is incredibly limited. It's more of a novelty now than anything else. I'll give it a score of 1.5 out of 5. Our last game for this episode is Ninja Golf for the 7800. Since the advent of YouTube, several people have discovered this game and made videos about how silly and absurd it is, such as the Angry Video Game Nerd. And yes, it is a pretty daft game that combines ninja action with the sport of golf. But after you get over the novelty of that, the game underneath isn't especially good. Neither the golf part or the ninja part have much in the way of depth to them. The game does feature some nicely drawn graphics, but the gameplay just isn't all that remarkable. If someone were to take this basic idea, make the Golf as good as Everybody's Golf or Mario Golf, and the side-scrolling ninja parts on par with Ninja Gaiden or The Messenger, then you could potentially have an awesome game on your hands. As it is, this is an amusing diversion for a little while, but it isn't a game that I have any urge to play again. I'll give it a very middle-of-the-road 2.5 out of 5. That concludes part 3, but there's still one more part to come. Join me again for that very soon, and in the meantime, take care.